We're in the middle of filming a podcast.
Hi!
You guys okay?
They're filming something. Oh, I'm sorry.
I
Mister, how you doing? They're filming. They're filming something.
you got are you guys? You better not be Spartans because you sound drunk.
Go. Zephyr launches into this one.
Welcome back to beautiful with no shoes. Welcome back to beautiful Pittsfield, where it's not raining and it's very beautiful out. And I'm with once again these fabulous gentlemen: Colonel Nye to my right, myself, Sephra, Mr. Joe DeSena or DeSena, depending on who pronounces your name, and Johnny Waite with Miss Marion behind the videographer camera, whatever that's called. So today we are interviewing Andrew Marantz, who is an awesome person. I got to hang out with him on the Spartan cruise, and he writes for the New Yorker and for Men's Journal. And
smart guy.
Really smart guy, super smart guy. You wouldn't expect it, but I'm just joking.
It's gonna be a dark interview because the lights were out, but it was well worth it, even though it was dark.
That'll come in handy for those of you who listen instead of watch.
All right, so let's go into the darkness here.
We are here for Spartan Up podcast, and I am tired, but that doesn't mean it's not going to be a great podcast. I'm with Andrew. Andrew, I don't know your last name.
Marantz.
Marantz, and you're a writer for New Yorker magazine.
Yeah.
And now you're doing something for Men's Journal.
Yeah.
Awesome. And you've been writing for a long time.
Yeah, writing and editing. Been at the New Yorker for like 4 years and freelance before that.
You're super cerebral, and we're going to get into some really deep, heavy stuff. So the idea with the podcast is to figure out what are the attributes or signals or tricks or things that we can learn and apply to be successful, no matter how we define success. And understanding that there's a lot of people out there that can't even, for lack of a better term, even get off the couch. Like, forget it. It's not even like they're on the road and traveling 70 miles an hour and need some tips. They're not even driving. They don't even have a car. So I don't know what your thoughts are there.
Yeah, I feel out of place on a boat full of people who are literally motivational speakers for a living to be giving motivational advice. So I'll steer away from the advice thing because I don't know how to do that very well. But I do think that the reason, in my experience, that people, including myself, stay like in a zone they don't want to be in mentally or physically or whatever, for me it's usually the thing we were talking about earlier of the gap between associating what comes later with what happens now.
Your hamburger showed up, which is what comes now.
Yes.
So I'll go get your burger. You keep talking.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think it's. I mean, we were. You and I were talking about this too. Like the difference between what do I want to do in this moment and what do I want to do that will set me up to feel some way later. Right. And food actually is sort of the simplest analogy. There's always, food is sort of designed to prey in almost an evolutionary biology sense on, immediate needs, immediate hunger, fat, sugar, salt, whatever. And obviously, we've gotten to a point where we know that the thing that I want to taste at the moment is not always the thing that I should be eating for a variety of reasons. So, that kind of logic can apply to anything in life, including food, but also anything else. Like a lot of things that, anyone does who has a career, job, passion, interest, hobby, whatever, it's not everything building on itself in the moment. There's something tomorrow, there's something next week. That's why the thing about live each day as if it's your last, I personally think is like crazy. You can't take that literally.
No, you can't take it literally.
So
there's components to you think about it. There are something to take away from that, but it's not what it means.
Yeah, when people say live each day as your last, if they're like, cut out the bullshit, don't waste time, flipping through channels and whatever. Fine, cool, but don't do that because it's your last day on Earth. Do it just because it's not a good idea. Because if it was your last day on Earth, I would never file my taxes. I would never go shoe shopping. You know what I mean? But there are some things you actually have to do.
Sure.
So I do think that disconnect between, I never will ever in my life want to go shopping for shoes. But I know that at some point I'm going to need to wear new shoes. So, you know what I mean? That it sounds really stupid, but that differential between the now and the later and trying to bridge the gap mentally, I think is a huge part
How
of
do
it.
you learn that, and how do you teach it?
I don't know. I think part of it is, it's funny that we're talking about, Indian yogi stuff. I think a lot of that I actually learned through having had the experience of meditating before. I don't meditate all the time, but having had the experience of, that's a classic example of something where like sitting in silence for an hour is not the thing that you want to be doing at most moments of your life. But it helps you in a lot of other ways down the line. And so a huge thing that I learned from that, again, sounds really simple, but there's a difference between knowing it intellectually and learning it experientially, is, okay, I have an itch on my foot, but it's not going to be there forever. The way that I feel now is not going to be the way I feel forever. The thing that I'm going to experience in 5 hours or 5 days or 5 years might, because I did this, might not be apparent to me right now. So it's just like having had that experience.
But you got to go through it.
Yeah.
And for me, I think when I started to do these long distance adventure races, and I was in it, but I knew the concept earlier, and I was still applying. I was working hard for long-term returns, but I think it really sunk in when I was in extreme pain, right, and really needed water or food, and then somehow you push through and you come out the other side, and you're like, this too shall pass.
Yeah. Yeah, right? And I think it's funny because, we have different disciplines, different ways of approaching it, different ways of getting there. I will probably be the person who's ever appeared on this podcast who's the least able to give fitness advice of anyone, but like there is a similarity, and I don't experience it through, I've had moments of suffering in my life that were instructive and helpful, but that's not my primary thing that I go to mentally, but it's basically the same lesson, which is like, there's something more important than my immediate comfort.
Getting your paper done or your book done early.
Totally.
Not pushing it till the last minute.
Yeah, or just pushing yourself to make it better. Because with writing especially, writing is one of the few things. There's this really good, actually speaking of India again, there's a novel by Jeff Dyer, who's a really brilliant writer. He wrote this book called, it's a diptych, it's called Jeff in Venice, Death in Varanasi. So half of it takes place in Varanasi. And while he's there, this narrator character, who's very similar to Jeff Dyer himself, is talking about how he's watching these musicians play, and he's talking about how amazing it would be to have a discipline, have an art form that you just spontaneously enjoyed doing every time you did it. Because he's watching them and they're like rapturously engaged with the music they're playing. Whereas he's a writer and he knows, even for writers, writing sometimes sucks.
Yeah, right.
Like often. So it's a very weird thing. That made me think a lot, being a writer, because I read that and was like, yeah, isn't it weird that the thing that I say that I'm most passionate about, the thing I say I enjoy doing the most, actually on an experiential level I often don't enjoy doing at all. Like that's.
But maybe that's the reason you like it, right?
Didn't make me stop writing to have that thought. Right. It made me think about why I do it, and part of it is, I think because you don't have to enjoy something every second for it to be a thing that you think is worth doing.
I could tell you for sure. I did a lot of racing, a lot of long distance stuff. I did a race yesterday here carrying the rock, and it's not fun when you're in the middle of it. Mm-hmm. But then somehow you come out the other side and you're like, I don't know, there's something called future memory. Have you heard this term, future, right?
No, I haven't heard the term.
So your brain releases all those endorphins, you're feeling good. Your brain will then give you another taste of it in the future, right?
I see. It's like flooding women with
epidurals or
yeah. Well, they're natural oxytocin after childbirth. It's like, right. Wasn't that great? Let's do that again.
Yeah, right. No, I think that's right.
Yeah, and it totally happens with writing. There are definitely times where, because writing anything, when you sit down to do it, you have the blank page. It's terrifying and exhausting, and you're like, this is never going to work.
I'm sorry. Maybe it's as simple as that. By the way, what we just talked about. Maybe the reason the suffering is good and those things are more enjoyable is because of the release of the endorphins.
Maybe, but there is definitely a way of explaining these things that boils down to biology or chemicals in your brain, and ultimately, not to get too deep and cerebral, but ultimately I am sort of a biological materialist on those questions. Like, I do think that we are bunches of chemicals sloshing around.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there aren't other levels that are happening at the same time. So like you could have, in theory, someone inject you with those endorphins and it wouldn't have all the same, you know what I mean? Just like you could get vitamins from a supplement and not from food, and I don't think we've entirely figured out how to engineer it to reduce it just to the brain chemicals.
There are. I mean, people do inject themselves with drugs and
Totally.
alcohol, and right? And so, I mean, and that's why they're probably doing it, because they're not getting their fix
Right.
elsewhere.
Right. And so then you start breaking it down into its constituent parts of like, okay, it can't just be the endorphins. If I could buy those endorphins at a store, it wouldn't give me the complete package of what I'm looking for. So then
Right.
you start going, well, what else is it? Is it the blisters on my fingers?
Sure.
Is it, you know what I mean? And that's true with writing too. Like, you know, there are ways that people can cheat on their term papers. People can, you know, there are all kinds of shortcuts, especially with a piece of writing that you never know how carefully someone's going to read it. You never know how many people are going to read it.
Right.
There are all kinds of ways that I could skip literally hours, and make one sentence less good. And like, you just don't do it because it's this weird, I almost don't know why you don't do it.
Well, you could cut the corners in a 50-mile run too,
Totally.
right?
I mean, you could cut the corners in a Spartan sprint. I mean,
Yeah.
but like, you don't because, well, there's a lot of reasons you don't. But
Well, there may be. I mean, it may go back to biology. When you
Yeah.
get to the finish line, less chemicals may get released
Yeah.
because you know you cheated.
yeah, that's part of it. I mean,
Right.
but it's not. But see, it's chemicals, but it's also like there's something more abstract going on. There's like a value system in place where you just go, the value that I'm trying to maximize here is commitment to a certain goal or making this piece of writing as good as it can be. That's a different thing. Then you're operating on a plane of like trying to meet.
Well, maybe the chemical release is tied to the original commitment.
Maybe.
I mean, if you were working on the Lufthansa heist way back when, you probably got a very similar chemical release when you pulled it off.
Uh-huh.
Right?
Right. But yeah. I mean, but then, you know, maybe yeah, I don't know. I definitely think the chemicals are involved, but I also think that like
Is it like just a sense of accomplishment? I mean, is that why you don't have that? Is that
Yeah,
your
but
release?
ultimately, I guess I'm just asking. Yes, it's a sense of accomplishment, but what is it that occurs when you achieve sense? It's drugs being released in your head.
totally, but I also like, I mean, I'm introducing something that maybe applies more to the writing than to, because sports you can win or lose, arts are more subjective. So I have, you know, there's an abstract rubric of quality that like someone could give me just as much money, just as many accolades and awards, just as many people come up to me and pat me on the back. Not that this happens to writers often, but like, hey, good piece. That could happen as many times as you want, but if I don't think that it was good, then it's not going to mean as much to me. So that's where like the chemical thing, I don't know. I mean, you might say, well, your brain just isn't giving you the right chemicals because your brain isn't telling you that you did a good job.
Well, no, it's got to come from the. I mean, we've had lots of discussions on the podcast. It's got to come from the inside, right? It's got to be.
Yeah.
The drive has to be about you and not about the external pat on the back and all those things. So subconsciously, consciously, you know what the outcome was, whether it's art or finish line at the race or stealing a bunch of gold bars.
Yep. And arts is an interesting kind of weird fit with the sports stuff because you never have the goal. I mean, you know, you can have someone come in and say, I ran 150 miles and I know I did it because I was on videotape and I didn't pass out, and, you know, now I'm going to run 160 next time. Arts aren't like that. Like, you can't say, I know what I did is good. Even if I really think what I did is good, which rarely if ever happens, I'm not going to think so in a year. Anytime I look at something I wrote a year ago, I think it's bad. So, and then my subjective view of it right now is not only going to change over time, but it's going to be different from everyone else's. And some people aren't even going to give a shit. Some people are just going to, like, see the picture, see the headline, and move on. Like, vast majority of people.
Did you see, what was the Vivian Mayer?
Oh, I didn't see it. I heard it was great.
You have to see that. So for
Finding,
those for those listening, Finding Vivian Mayer. So you know the story, right? And so there's an example of an artist, right, that goes 30, 40 years, takes 100,000 photos, never develops one.
Yeah, like Emily Dickinson style, just like outsider artist. And that is a whole can of worms of like, why do we have this urge to create things even if we don't produce them or show them to people? Like,
Yeah.
I'm in a middle zone there because the stuff I do has an audience. You know, I'm getting commissioned to write things for publication. I mean, I write things not for publication too, but my main thing is doing things that people are
I mean, so you have a finish line. You've got to deliver it.
Totally.
You get paid. Why don't we take a break? You eat your burger. I'll write a book.
All right, cool.
And then we'll come back.
I hope you're not sitting still while you listen. If you are, you better get a burpee break in.
I had no idea you eat that fast. I didn't really even get a page done on my book.
No, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty fast eater, especially when I have an audience.
Marion, our fearless producer, was mentioning something you were tackling that was interesting regarding.
Oh yeah, we were talking about the sort of difference between innovation and technical mastery of a skill, because we were talking about conceptual art before, and the way that pushes art forward. You were saying you need the stuff on the fringes to push art forward, and I was saying that's true, but also my way of framing that was like some artists are virtuosos, technical proficient masters, and then other artists are innovators, and like they're obviously not mutually exclusive.
I mean, it would be. I'm thinking, as you say that, I'm thinking, okay, there are builders, there are guys that build houses.
Yep.
Some are going to go way out there and design something wild, and the others are just going to frame a house and.
Totally. I mean, and I mean.
How does the person out there listening to this figure out where they should play?
Well, it depends on. I mean, so one thing is that the virtuoso route is all about practice and repetition. So, if you are the kind of, I mean, I would say that the innovator type person is sort of always trying to find the next thing and gets bored with this thing and tries to do the next thing. And the virtuoso person is like, no, I'll do this thing 100,000 times, until I get it right. I'm thinking like, a classical pianist who's like, I'm going to practice for 8 hours until my fingers bleed. I mean, a lot of the endurance athletic stuff is the virtuoso thing. It's just like, I'm going to just drill on this until I get it perfect.
Until it's done. Yeah,
they're not necessarily being like, a way to change this sport would be if I like jumped the other direction and went around. It's like there are rules. I'm just going to do it as well as I can.
It's so funny you say that because I was talking to a really, really, really smart woman from Wall Street, and she became friends with the owner of the Red Sox, and she had never gone to a baseball game before. And she said she immediately looked at the field and said, "Why don't they run to the left?"
Yeah.
And the owner said, "That's a really good question."
There are rules, and like there are actually different sports that evolve at different speeds. Baseball evolves much more slowly than football.
Right.
I mean, you can do things in football with a defense that didn't exist a year ago.
I was going to say football is still evolving, right?
Football evolves so much more quickly than any others, and I mean, baseball. They're just sort of figuring out. They're figuring out sabermetrics. They're figuring out how to divide the field and figure out where to place outfielders. Football, that was like. Within the first 10 years, I mean, they didn't even have an overhead pass when they first started football, and now it's like wildcat defense and this defense and that. So, football coaches are like innovators. Football players run the routes. I mean, with the exception of quarterbacks and really, think on their feet kind of receivers. If you're a cornerback, you do training, you do, and you run the plays.
Yeah.
So, it's not better to be one or the other, and it's not like you have to be 100% of one and 0 of the other.
Both could be successful, clearly.
Yeah, and most people have some combination of both.
But at the core, I guess then the question is, I think it's always about motivation. How does a person get motivated? Right? Mm-hmm. Is it confidence? You got to have confidence to go do something. Is it? It's the thing that's been driving me crazy for 40 plus years on the planet. Not because I'm not motivated, because I'm super motivated, and I have no patience for people that are not motivated.
Interesting. I mean, it's such a broad thing. I mean, I do think that people, we're bringing up examples of people who are super proficient at one thing. They must, on some level, think it's important to be really good at that thing. There must be some idea of carrying on a tradition of the way this Chopin etude should be played, the way this route should be run. Like, you've grown up in a football family, football's really important, there's a purpose to it. If you were just like, you guys know this is all made up and we don't have to do any of this, then you would just pop out of that illusion and be like, why am I getting brain damage to do this? Yeah.
Yeah, and so I interviewed a woman, a mom of 4, 29-year-old girl, wakes up at like 4 a.m., goes to the gym for a couple hours, comes back, gets all the kids up, cooks breakfast, homeschools them. If there's a hole in the roof, gets up on the roof, repairs it, right? Like, just unbelievable. Does another workout at night after all the kids are sleeping. Dad was a sergeant, whatever, high-ranking military officer at some point. Is it parents? Is it upbringing? Is it?
Yeah, I think it's a combination. I mean, you were talking about biology earlier. I think biology has a lot to do with it. I think upbringing has a lot to do with it.
I can't imagine there were any lazy Spartans. Right? So
Yeah.
is it, and they're doing a lot of studies now on twins.
Yeah.
Right? So maybe it's more environment.
Yeah. Although, you would have, I'm sure that you had people who in ancient Sparta couldn't do it, were insolent, were mentally disabled, were, it's not like there's always just a panacea where biology doesn't come into it. Those people might have been much more, there might have been much more severe consequences, but I do think it's always a combination.
But so if it's biology and it's upbringing, and somebody didn't have the best upbringing, they don't have the best biology, and now they're 35 years old listening to this, what do they do?
You just take an ice bath every morning and eat a lot of raw beef.
And you get going?
I think you're good. No, I don't know. I mean, it's such a broad thing. Like, the thing we were talking about earlier of matching up the immediate consequences versus, thinking about more long-term. I think, to me, that's something that anyone can do. It's just like, okay, if I eat this right now, how am I going to feel in 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 50 minutes, That's something anyone can do. Like, and you're always weighing. It's not like you stop weighing one thing and another. Like, I might know if I eat this burger in 10 seconds, I'm going to feel weird, but it might be worth it to me because I want to get the show on the road and let you get to sleep. So you're weighing constantly different metrics. So some people, like, they're not going to be an NFL cornerback because they are 5 feet tall, or they're not going to be a concert violinist because they don't have 10 hours a day to practice.
But they should be productive.
Sure. So, yes, if that's what So, if you want to talk about how can you do something rather than nothing, if that's what you want to be doing, I think it's about thinking more long term. It's like just that basic thing of like, how are you going to feel at the end of the day?
But that came from your parents probably pounding in your head for 10 years.
Maybe.
Finish this. Because I don't think instinctually that's something that...
Maybe. Although, the future learning thing, like, you might have learned, you might have had an association. I've definitely had days where I didn't get anything good done. And
I didn't feel good.
Yeah, I was just like, why did I do that?
Unproductive.
And then I've had days where I have been running around doing all kinds of...
We're in the middle of filming a podcast.
Hi!
Are you guys okay?
They're filming something. Oh, I'm sorry.
I
missed that. How you doing? They're filming something.
you guys, you better not be Spartans because you sound drunk.
I don't know that everybody needs to be go, go, go all day long. That might be your style, but I don't know if some people...
I guess at the end of the day, you have your own value matrix, like you said earlier, right? Yeah. And if that day checks the box for you, then...
Right, and it's learning to make the association of what it was that did or didn't check the box. So it's not just like, a weird passing whim or fancy, or like, it's so weird that the day that I slept 2 hours, I'm tired the next day. Like that's probably related.
Sure.
Yeah.
With that, why don't we take a nap?
Let's do it.
Zephyra, bring us back.
We're back.
All right, so obviously you could see the Spartan cruise was a fun time, and this kid he has a lot of great things to say. I don't know, and I like his comment that writing's subjective. It's not like the Spartan race where there's a finish line, like you win, you lose, you're ranked. Writing's kind of like Do you like it?
You don't. Yeah, you don't know. I know. We've got mixed reviews right here on the podcast. Colonel Nye was a little like, I don't know if I like that one, Joe. You looked a little tired.
I thought you meant the viewers. Like, I don't know.
but we do though, right? Because with viewers, we'll have one podcast where half the viewers are like, that's the best one ever, and other ones go, what are those guys doing? Are they drunk that day, right?
What you get from it, right? You got to draw your own lessons.
Yeah, it's
anything in life. Thank you.
It's art versus science.
Again,
we hope
violent agreement, I think.
Yeah, we hope people watch these things and everybody gets something, but some, just like the children we're teaching, right?
So, one thing I really liked in this, you mentioned it in a previous one, sort of a bumper sticker slogan that really resonated. And I love how he sort of pops a pin into a bumper sticker slogan, and he says, the idea about live each day like it's your last is great in theory, but then you're not going to pay your taxes, you're not going to go buy shoes when they're falling apart, you're not going to go buy groceries because you don't need them for tomorrow. And he talked about through meditation, he learned that, everything is temporary, but you also have to constantly be in the flow of things. And so I like that idea that, you want the passion of going out and living with the energy of your last day, but you still have to shop for groceries and do your taxes.
Right. I think he's talking about the concept of consequences, right?
Sure.
I mean, that there is, even if it was your last day, then what? There are still things you would have to do in that day, right? Yeah. So, I mean, it's not just like, woo, it's a party then if it's the last day. Yeah. You would still have responsibilities.
Yeah. See, I think
you would still have, go ahead.
Oh, no, please, Colonel.
No, please.
You always defer to the Colonel.
Go ahead.
Well, I just think it's a pessimistic. I mean, what about today's the first day of the rest of your life? Like, it honestly took me a year to figure out what that meant. I didn't quite get it. But it just seems like, sorry. So it just seems like, I don't know, celebrate each moment, celebrate each day. Yeah. And it's not like, because this is the end. Oh, it's the beginning of who knows what. Or maybe this is my 1,800th year.
I think he would agree with you on that one. I think he would like that bumper sticker.
Like Sai Baba. All right, I'm going to bring it in. This part may or may not still be in the podcast. But Joe had a guru that people thought was your dad.
I grew up in a household where my mother was very forward thinking, and at the time didn't seem forward thinking. She got into yoga, meditation. She became vegan, and she found this guru out of India. His name was Sai Baba. He's no longer alive. He wore an orange robe. He would create vibhuti. They called it little dust out of his hand. He was like the second coming. You're my guru. So anyway, we had pictures of this guy all over our house, and
people thought he was your dad.
People thought he was my dad, my uncle. He was a giant afro, and it was very hard to explain as a young person. But I tell you what positive thing came out of it was it got my sister and I to have very open minds towards different stuff.
And that's what I think, and that's what Andrew talks about, because he went to Sai Baba's pilgrimage site, and I feel like a lot of these races are pilgrimages, and I guess the loose association I'm trying to make here is he has to have an open mind to write about all the different things that he writes about, and then be able to see it from multiple perspectives and have a sense of humor about it and bring a new lens and perspective to it. And that's what I think is interesting about writing, is where do you find that new way in that's refreshing and engages people, and how do you hook people?
I mean, that's a big thing, right? You could get very structured. Speaking to the military guy, you could get so structured and closed-minded and have blinders on that you might not accept new ideas, new ways of doing things.
Yeah, I guess you could if you were predisposed to be that kind of guy. But I think most writers probably approach things as an exploration, if that's what they're doing. And so I would think they would go in and they try to find out information and then bring that information or that story alive somehow, or bring it to the people. So I think I think it's an extraordinarily hard profession, and I think it exposes a person and an artist to they get some rewards, as we were talking earlier, but they also get a lot of ridicule because, probably 50% is probably a pretty good margin to go for one way or the other. But you have to believe what you've done is your best. And this goes back to what we started with. There is no finish line on that. There's no, I've done this, I won this award or whatever. They have to believe themselves
they've done the best
they could, and they're satisfied with the writing. And at least my little knowledge of some writers is they never get there. That's a constant quest to always.
I'll tell you,
to write something new and better and
I'll tell you,
cleaner.
With Spartan Up the book, I got to a point where I said, okay, it's not perfect. Should I spend another 6 months and get it perfect? And my friend who reads literally a book a day said it'll never be perfect. It's good enough.
Right.
Get it out there.
And that's kind of how I feel about this podcast right now. No. I'm kidding. I know that Marion's telling me we're coming up to the end of the time we have here. So I think
good enough.
I think it's good enough. Certainly, Andrew's great. I think that we dived in a little bit to what he had to say.
Delve.
Let's go with delve. God, bailed me out there. So speaking of which, go to SpartanUpPodcast.com where Sephra will teach you great new words like delve. And you'll learn more about Andrew as well as our other podcast. You'll see what we're up to. Thanks so much.
For show notes, video, and audio of this episode, visit SpartanUpPodcast.com/068 or follow us on Twitter at SpartanUpPod. The Spartan Up Podcast is brought to you by Spartan.
To find a race near you, visit Spartan.com.